souls. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name is Carolyn and this channel is all about true crime, mystery, and anything abnormal. I highly recommend subscribing because this channel is definitely a vibe. I just want to say a huge thank you for all of the outpouring of love and support from my last video. I'll go into that a little bit later at the end of the video, but for right now I'm going to jump right into today's story because it is wild. In 1980, Sue moved herself and her children to Keddie to get a fresh start. Little did she know that it would end up being a fatal decision and would end up being one of the most bizarre cases in American criminal history. On the morning of April 12th, 1981, the bodies of 36-year-old Sue Sharp, her 15-year-old son John Sharp, and his 17-year-old friend Dana Wingate would all be found brutally murdered. They were all found in the living room in cabin 28. The brutality of the crime shocked the nation. Plumas County, California, where they lived, seemed to be a fairly safe place. It was not a place where very many murders had taken place, and generally it was considered to be quite a safe area. It was extremely rare for there to be murders, and there definitely had never been anything close to as gruesome as this crime. The victims seemed to be chosen at random, and as terrifying as the discovery of the three bodies was, something even worse had actually happened because Sue's 12-year-old daughter, Tina, was missing. The police in Plumas County were overwhelmed immediately with 3 murders and a missing 12-year-old girl. The crime seemed extremely personal. It seemed as though whoever had committed this crime had a lot of rage directed towards the victims. Sue Sharp, the mother, who was murdered, she was the mother of 5 children, and as I had mentioned, they had relocated to the area from Connecticut. She had ended up moving there because her brother lived there, and she thought that this was going to be a great new beginning for her family. Immediately, the first suspect was Sue's ex-husband, because he had been abusive in their relationship, but he was very quickly ruled out as he was on the other side of the country when the crime occurred. Sue was a pretty quiet, private person. She didn't have a lot of friends. She didn't socialize a lot. It seemed like her biggest concern in life was taking care of those 5 amazing children she had. She had dated a few local men, but it was very casual, and there was nothing in the relationships that she had with these men that would lead them to have any towards of animosity or anger directed towards her. There were potential witnesses and witnesses of what had happened prior to the murders. John Sharp and Dana Wingate, who were the 2 teenage boys that were killed, were seen the night before. They were hanging out, and the agreement was that Dana could spend the night at John's cabin with his family. The only rule they had was that the boys did not hitchhike. Unfortunately, it is discovered that the boys did not listen to that, and they did end up hitchhiking. The 2 boys were hanging out that evening, and their plan was to go back and hang out in John's bedroom in the cabin, but bizarrely, they were found in the living room upstairs, which many found mysterious from the very beginning. The reason that this was considered a little bit mysterious is because John's bedroom, while it was in the same cabin, you could not access the rest of the cabin from his bedroom. So I'll put a picture in here of the cabin, but there's a door that goes into John's bedroom, and you can't go anywhere else in the house. You just go in that door. It's John's bedroom, and everything else. You go up some stairs, there's a door, and that's where you go in the main cabin, which is where the living room is and which is where the 3 bodies were found. The 3 bodies were discovered by 14-year-old Sheila Sharp, who was Sue's daughter. She had had a sleepover at her friend's house in a cabin very close by. And at 7 a.m., she decided to go home. And she walked in the door to the cabin, and she was just in shock and in horror at what she was seeing. All she knew that there were 3 dead bodies. So she ran, obviously, out of the cabin and went back to her friend's house where they called 911. The thing is that Sheila, when she returned, she told the mother of her friend, who was the one who called 911, that there were 3 dead bodies in her cabin. These bodies were brutalized so badly that when Sheila saw them, she didn't recognize them as her mother, her brother, and her brother's friend. She had no idea who they were because their injuries were absolutely horrific. The 3 victims were all bound with medical tape and with electrical cords, and these were electrical cords that were taken from within the household. Also, the phone had been disconnected. When police looked at the crime scene, Sue, she was bound the most. She was also the one who suffered the most amount of injuries. So from the very beginning, it was believed that the intended target or the anger this person had was directed towards Sue. It was also thought that there had to be more than one person involved in the crime. Both Sue and John had been stabbed many times. They had all been bludgeoned. It was just absolutely, somebody went in there with the intention to just destroy these people. Some believed initially that Dana, the friend, had been forced to bind the other 2 before he was bound and killed, because Dana was killed in a different way than Sue and John. So Sue and her 15-year-old son, John, they were both bludgeoned to death. And Sue, it was found that she was bludgeoned to death with a pellet gun, but that was never recovered. Dana, the friend, was strangled to death. And after he had been strangled and killed, someone had taken a hammer and hit him in the face until it was unrecognizable. And the bizarre thing is no one heard anything. There were cabins quite close by. The one that Sheila was staying at, who was the 14-year-old daughter who discovered the bodies, she was in a cabin very, very close to the cabin where this occurred. Also, there was a cabin next door, and that was the Smart family. They also claimed that they had not heard anything. Now, let me tell you the weirdest, craziest part. So the 3 of them are dead in the living room, right? In a bedroom, there is 12-year-old Justin Smart, who is the next door neighbor's son. And his father, Martin Sharp, he's going to come up again. Also asleep in that room was Sue's 2 other sons. So all of this had happened in the living room, and these 3 boys are sleeping in a bedroom right beside the living room. So when police arrive, they are able to, from the window of the bedroom, they actually take the boys out the window so they don't have to go and walk through the crime scene. And immediately they're questioned by police to see, did they see anything? Did they hear anything? Like, what do these young boys know? And Justin, the 12-year-old, he was interviewed with his mother. and they were sitting in a police car, and he told the police officers that 12-year-old Tina is missing. Like, he kept bringing up the fact that no one knows where Tina is. Tina was at the cabin with us last night. And police, they kept ignoring this mention that Justin would make about Tina being in the home. And Justin's mother even at one point said, "Are you listening to him? Do you not realize he's telling you there's a missing 12-year-old girl?" And this is where I'm telling you, this is a really, really suspicious case. So 911 is called at 7 a.m. The police come, the three boys, they're taken out the window, and they're questioned right away. So let's even say it takes an hour. Let's say by the time they have, arrived at the scene, got the boys out, they have them in the police car right outside the cabin asking them questions. Let's say that took an hour. They would have known by 8 a.m. that Tina was missing. But it was ignored. The police didn't actually realize that Tina was missing for 4 hours. What? Like, they had people at the scene telling them there is a 12-year-old girl that should be in this cabin and she's not here. And the police just would ignore anyone who would bring Tina up. And it's really strange because the 3 people who were murdered, okay, they're murdered. You can't do anything to save them at this point. Obviously, it needs to be investigated and there's the whole process needs to happen. But if there's someone who's been kidnapped, that would be your number one priority. And the other thing is that if you don't know, which if you're watching this channel, you probably know, but kidnapping is a federal offense. So if someone is kidnapped, the FBI will come in and handle the case. But the sheriff was not interested in any help from the FBI or from the Department of Justice in California. And there's a lot of theories as to why he didn't want help. Some people claim he didn't want help because he wanted to be a big shot. He wanted to solve this murder and he didn't want other people interfering in what he was going to do, which, spoiler alert, he just destroys everything and ruins the entire case. But there's a much more plausible, in my opinion, theory as to why the sheriff did everything he could to keep the FBI and the DOJ out of this. And that is that he was very close friends with the prime suspect. So I'm going to go into that theory a little bit later when we get into all the suspects, because there's a lot. This is an unsolved case. So there's a lot of theories, there's a lot of suspects, but just know that the sheriff's department is not doing their job and they are fighting tooth and nail to try to stop any other law enforcement from coming in and helping. And because of this, the search for Tina was delayed dramatically. And the opinion of most people is the reason the case has never been solved and will most likely never be solved is that the sheriff's department that was trying to handle a triple homicide and a kidnapping, they messed up interviews, they messed up evidence. The cabin and the crime scene, civilians could walk through the crime scene. Police were walking all over the crime scene. There was absolutely no thought behind protecting the crime scene. And arguably the biggest mistake that was made in this case was the interview of Justin Smart. So Justin Smart is the 12-year-old boy who was sleeping over at the Sharp residence, and he was interviewed by people that were not really trained on how to interview a traumatized 12-year-old boy that may have witnessed something. So they start interviewing him and asking him questions, but they're kind of leading him in a certain direction. And then at one point, he describes a dream he had of two suspects. The police get a sketch artist. They put out pictures of these two alleged suspects, but they weren't people Justin had seen. They were from a dream. So I don't know what's going on, but if Justin, I believe that Justin probably did see something and he was very traumatized. And if the sheriff would have done the right thing, which would have been to involve the FBI immediately, they could have had someone come in who is specifically trained to interview and the proper techniques that you would be interviewing first a child, someone who's just gone through a traumatic event. It could have been that he had vital information, but the sheriff's department just confused the hell out of him and he didn't know what was what after talking to the police anymore. So after speaking with Justin a few times and his story kind of changing and him going in saying, I don't know, like this could have been a dream, the sheriff's department, they just got bored. They got bored of interviewing Justin, who was the most important witness in this case. And they just got bored of him, and that was that. They had no more interest in talking to him. So this took place in 1981. So DNA wasn't really a thing yet. Fingerprinting was and had been for over 100 years at that point. But there was very strict protocol for how police handle a crime scene and collection of biological evidence and collection of all the evidence in the cabin. And all of it was just a shit show. I don't know what else to call it, because it's just, I don't know, nobody knew what they were doing and nobody was willing to let anybody help them do it correctly. But all of the evidence in this entire case is either destroyed, lost, or it was improperly stored, so it's completely useless. So with all evidence lost or destroyed, the media and the public wanted to know why. Like, they had a lot of questions for the Plumas County Police. And the police, especially the sheriff, was very aggressive and very hostile towards the media in regards to their inability to collect evidence properly or store evidence properly. And again, some think that it was maybe ego and he didn't want to be questioned because he knew he had messed up. There's others who think he may have messed up intentionally to try to make sure this crime wasn't solved. And once I give you a little bit more information, I'm really interested to know what you guys think. For more than 40 years, the media and citizens have been pushing to try to find out what happened and why this was mishandled so badly. And it's really created a lot of like conspiracies and a lot of mystery around what really happened, who did it, and did someone help cover it up. About 3 years after the murders, someone found a skull, and it was about, now when I've researched this, I've heard everything from 30 to 80 miles away. I don't know exactly how far away this skull was found from the crime scene because every source I looked at had a different answer. So somewhere between 30 and 80 miles from the crime scene. 3 years after the crime, a worker finds a human skull. So they obviously police, like it's a different police department that's handling that. They're going in, they're collecting, the bones and, trying to figure out who is this, what happened. They're just really in the initial stages of trying to figure out who this skull belonged to. Now, they did end up finding more bones and once they had searched a little bit more. But one thing that's very suspicious that happened is that right after the skull was found, there was an anonymous call made to that police department. So not the Plumas County Sheriff's Department. The skull was found in another county, so it was a different police that was being contacted. But somebody anonymously called and said, have you considered that that may be the body of Tina Sharp? And for some reason, they could never figure out who the call was. They recorded the call. They made a backup tape of the call. And guess what? They lost the original and they lost the backup copy. So there is just really, let me just be honest with you. This case wasn't going to be solved from the beginning. Immediately, the sheriff messed this whole thing up. I very much believe, could have been solved if they had let the FBI come in and do everything that the FBI wanted to do to assist them, if they would have had the DOJ come in and do what they could do to help them, but no. So let me go through the suspects, because there's a wide array of suspects and a lot of theories that kind of match up to each person. So one suspect was Tina, who's the 12-year-old missing girl we find out 3 years later had passed, a teacher of hers. So there was a teacher at school. I think it was her music teacher, but I can't remember. I know it wasn't her full-time teacher. She had a class sometimes with this teacher. And this teacher was believed to have a very unhealthy obsession with Tina. Also, let me tell you this. Years later, he was charged and convicted of essaying a child. But here's why I don't think it makes sense that it was the teacher. I'm dying to know your guys' opinion, so you definitely have to let me know who you think did it and why. The reason I don't believe that it was the teacher is people who want to kidnap children, they don't usually go into the house where other people are to take the children. When people go into a house to kidnap a child, it's because they have no other access to the child. This was a teacher at her school. He had access to her almost every single day. So to me, it doesn't make sense that he would go into a home with 6 other people than Tina, kill 3 of them just to kidnap Tina. It would be so much easier if that was his intention, would be to take her from school, take her walking home from school. Like, it was so, he had so much access to her. To me, it doesn't make sense that he would ever have gone in the house, committed these murders. If what he's truly after is just Tina, to me, it doesn't make sense. But let me know what you think, because maybe other people can see it another way. Another suspect was Robert Silvera. He was known as the boxcar killer. He was a serial killer who had between 9 and 30 plus murders. It's unknown exactly how many people he actually did kill. And I think the strongest case for him as a suspect is that he was known to be in Plumas County in 1981 at the time of the murders. And he had also committed one of the murders that he was convicted of very close by the Keddie cabins. So I feel like he would have been a really good suspect. But I don't know if he would, like, I don't know how they ruled people in or out, because they destroyed all the evidence. Like, there was blood evidence. They could have got fingerprints. Like, there's so much evidence that they could have had to be able to compare and then, catch the killer. But it's just, without evidence, you can't solve it. You can't solve it without the evidence. So he was kind of put out there as a suspect, but I couldn't ever find anything to say they ruled him out, or, I don't know. I don't know that they really ruled anyone out. They didn't seem to know what they were doing. So he is definitely a good possibility. But there's an even better suspect. And this is a theory I believe. The next suspect was Martin Smart. Now, he lives next door. He is the father of Justin Smart. Justin Smart is the boy who was asleep in the bedroom in the cabin. Now, he lived next door, and his wife and Sue were really good friends. All of their kids played together, and the adults got along, and it seemed like, everything was pretty good. But quickly, there were quite a lot of things that made Martin and his friend Beau, who was a man who was staying with Martin and his family, very quickly, the two of them became the main suspects. First, it was believed that Justin, who had been interviewed, kind of had implicated his dad in his questioning, but because his questioning was done so poorly, we can't really use that as, a credible source, because the interview wasn't conducted correctly. It was a 12-year-old traumatized boy. So it seems that he was implicating his dad, but I don't know that there's enough that we could say 100% the interview was done correctly, so we can take what was said at value. And I'm not in any way trying to suggest that Justin wasn't honest. I think Justin, he was, I think, 100% honest. He was a traumatized 12-year-old boy with grown-ass men who were trying to solve a case that I don't know if their egos couldn't let them, or maybe they wanted to protect the perpetrators. Who knows? So on the night, April 11th, 1981, this is what happened before the murders. So Beau and Martin and his wife Marilyn, they're at their cabin, which is next door to Sue. They decide they want to go to the bar and, go out and have a good time. They want Sue to go with them. And Marilyn, the wife, keeps saying to them, Sue's not going to come with us. She doesn't want to go out to bars drinking. She's going to want to stay home with her kids. Let's not even bother asking her. But the two men were very determined. So the three of them go to Sue's house, next door, and ask her to come to the bar with them. And Sue says no, she doesn't want to go. So the three of them leave. Marilyn says that Martin and Beau were extremely angry that Sue would not go to the bar with them. So these three people, they go to the bar. They're at the bar. Martin apparently gets extremely angry at the music that is being played at the bar. So the three of them go back to the cabin. They go back to the cabin, and I guess Martin's on the phone yelling at the bar, I don't like the music you're playing. So I guess, I don't know, maybe they agreed to play different music. But Martin and Beau decide then to go back to the bar. But this time, Marilyn does not go with them. She's like, I'm done for the night. She stays home and she goes to bed. So then the two men, Martin and Bo, they go to the bar. Now, this is where all of their stories don't add up. The first contradiction is Martin and Bo both claim that when they got home, Marilyn was awake. And they talked to her, she was awake. And when Marilyn was questioned, she said her recollection was she went to bed, she fell asleep, they had gone to the bar and she just was sleeping. And then in the middle of the night, she says that she woke up and she saw Martin and Bo in the backyard burning things. She wasn't close enough that she could tell what they were burning. She didn't ask them any questions. She didn't even talk to them. She just immediately went back to bed. Marilyn also told police that Martin was extremely angry with Sue because Martin was extremely abusive to Marilyn and Sue had left an abusive relationship. So she was encouraging Marilyn to leave Martin because he was abusive. Martin found out about it and obviously he was furious. I would say that's a motive. Now, this part is pure speculation. I cannot confirm or deny if this is true or not. Many people who lived near the Keddie cabins and in the local area claim that Martin and the sheriff were BFFs, best friends for life. So there's all this confusion of why would the sheriff want to screw up this case? Guess what? The sheriff might want to screw up the case to protect his friend. But this is pure speculation. Alleged. No way to, I cannot confirm. There are a lot of people who claimed that they were best friends, but I don't know. So the investigation into Martin didn't really go anywhere. And the investigation into Bo, it didn't really go anywhere. Martin Sharp died in 1990, likely taking the secrets of what happened at Cabin 28 with him. Then, you want a huge twist? Listen to this. He dies in 1990. In 2000, his psychiatrist comes out and says that Martin had admitted to the murders. He told his therapist he had committed the murders and the motive was that Sue was trying to get his wife to leave him. The therapist says because of patient confidentiality, he could not go to the police with that information. I don't know. So what Martin had told the therapist was that the motive for the murder was they were going in there to kill Sue because she was trying to get Marilyn, Martin's wife, to leave him. And he says the two boys were collateral damage. And he also told his therapist that his son, Justin, had witnessed some of what had taken place. And he had told his therapist he had committed the crime with Bo. Now, Bo is a weird character on his own because when he's questioned by police, he tells them that he's impotent. They don't ask anything remotely close to that. They're just asking him general questions. And Sue's body was found naked from the bottom, like the bottom half of her body was naked. So some people theorize that possibly he either assaulted Sue or attempted to assault her and was somehow trying to say he was impotent so he couldn't have done that. Now, in the autopsy, there was nothing to indicate that Sue had been assaulted sexually, but to be honest, I don't really believe that anybody that handled this case in, like, none of them knew what they were doing. Everyone was morons. And I hate to say that, but it was just complete incompetence. Because with that therapist telling them this information, if they would have collected and stored the evidence properly, they could have tested it and they could have found out who the killer was. This could be solved. But there is absolutely not a single piece of evidence remaining from this murder. Another thing I forgot to tell you about Martin. So when Martin was questioned, before anybody knew, so I forgot to tell you something, and this is good. Okay, so think the day that the bodies are discovered, like the people that have been killed, they're in the cabin. So nobody knows yet, unless they've been in that cabin, what was used as weapons to kill these people, right? Martin just randomly says to a police officer, I don't know what they were killed with, but I had a hammer that went missing recently. A hammer was definitely used in the crime. And then a hammer that matched the description of what Martin had stated he had as a hammer was found years later in like a pond not far away from the crime scene. Another thing, the morning of the the morning that the bodies were discovered, Martin left his wife and she never spoke to him again. Like, he booked it out of town and he didn't tell her he was leaving. He just left and she never heard anything from him ever again. She eventually, in 1990, when he died, she got a phone call telling her that he had passed away, but she has no idea what had happened. So the prime suspect runs away right after the bodies are discovered. And also with Tina's body being not at the crime scene, somewhere between 30 and 80 miles away, did he leave the crime scene? Did he have Tina with him at that time when he left? Like, there's so many possibilities in this case. And it seems as though some people wanted to make sure that the Keddie murders were never solved, and they achieved that because they are unsolved, and I can't possibly imagine them ever solving it. Oh, and Beau's dead too. So I would love to know what you think of this case. Who do you think did it? And do you think that the police intentionally messed up the case? Do you think it was just they were incompetent? Do you think the sheriff just wanted to be a superstar who could solve this case on his own, which is what a lot of the locals think? But then they also mentioned that he was friends with Martin, so it's a whole lot of really, really interesting, but unfortunately, I think at this point, completely unsolvable. What I personally think, I think Martin and Beau did it, and they're dead, so it's not like it can be solved if they are the killers. Well, it doesn't really matter, honestly, because there's no evidence. So I don't know, how do you solve a case with no evidence? You can't, like, it's never going to be solved. So that is the end of today's story, and this was another suggestion. Thank you so much for suggesting it, because yeah, I went down a rabbit hole with this one, and there's all kinds of wild theories out there. There's a disgusting theory that Sheila, who's the 14-year-old girl who found the bodies, there's this whole theory that she planned and was involved. I didn't even mention it because I just think it's so ridiculous. And like, she's been through enough. She lost her mother, she lost her brother, she lost her sister. The amount of trauma she would have gone through just seeing that scene, like anyone who attacks her, I'm just like, you need to shut your mouth, because there's no evidence to suggest she was involved. And I think it's horrific to even speculate that she had anything to do with it. So yeah, that's the end of today's story. I hope I found it interesting, and I am dying to hear what you think. I just want to let everyone know I appreciate all of you so much who were so loving and supportive in my last video. I can't even believe I posted that video. It was like a completely rash decision. I just sat down with the camera, started filming. I didn't edit, I just upload whatever I said. And the amount of love and support that I've been getting, you guys are messaging me in the comment section. So many of you have contacted me through Instagram and has shared a lot of traumatic things you've gone through. And I just think I can't thank all of you for being so supportive. And please know that if you've got something that's happened in your life and you need someone to talk to, I'm on Instagram. I answer my DMs. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here. But I'm going to end the video here. Please like, subscribe, share. Really trying to get to 2,000 subscribers. So please interact with the video, and I will see you in the next one.